Welcome to Conversations of Hope, shining light on the journey of healing from abuse and trauma. I'm Faith Ingraham of Speaking Truth in Love Ministries.
And I'm Michelle Viscuse from Journey Pink. As survivors and advocates, we're here to support, educate, and inspire. Whether you're a survivor of abuse, a friend, family member, or a professional working with survivors, this podcast is for you.
We're breaking the silence that allows abuse to thrive, offering insights for healing and tools for effective support.
Our goal is to create a safe community of understanding, healing, and hope for survivors and their allies.
Visit conversationsofhopepodcast.org for resources and more information. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Well, we're back again on Conversations of Hope, and it's been a little while, and partly because we've been very busy lately and we haven't had time to record and edit. So today I wanted to just go back a little bit. The last time we were together, we talked about developing a vision board, and I had never done a vision board before or chosen a word for the year. And Michelle, you've done this many times in the past. And I just thought it was a great idea. And after we finished speaking, I sat down and I did a vision board and I chose my word for the year 2025. And my word for this year is purpose. And the reason I chose that is because I have had trouble maybe finishing the stuff that I need to do. I have many responsibilities and sometimes I get overwhelmed, and I needed something to kind of keep me focused and help me organize. And the verse that I chose was 1 Corinthians 10:3, which says, "Therefore, whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do all to the glory of God." And so my purpose is to do whatever I do to bring glory to God. And I'm going to just share my vision board for those that are watching the podcast. It shows I have part over here for ministry, and then I have over here for family, and I have down here friends and fun, because we have to have a balance, and then I have personal growth. So I did my vision board digitally. I didn't have any magazines, so I went online and I chose pictures from online and from my phone, like family pictures from my phone, and put them together digitally in like a collage type thing, and did it that way. And Michelle did hers differently. And would you like to share a little bit about your vision board for this year?
Sure. So we had a group that met together at our church, and we had a ton of magazines, and we stayed there for about 3 hours. And I had already completed one side of my board because I wasn't sure at the event if I would get to do a board, because I was usually busy doing other stuff and helping other people get together. But I was able to flip my board over and do the other side. And so my word for 2025 is create. And similar, so I have creators, creating in the middle. But similar to what you said, this is the board that I'd already made, and then this is the one that I made while I was at the event. But similar to what you said, the reason I picked the word create for this year is I have several verses that go behind that. Create in me a pure heart is one. The other one is, and that's from Psalm 51:10. And then you created me in my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. So I was created by God from the very beginning. And then Ephesians 2:10, we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which he prepared us to do in advance. And so all of this creating is to remind me, keep my heart pure, do the things that God's called me to do. I was created for a purpose. But the big one is Isaiah 43:7. And it says, everyone who is called by my name, whom I created for my glory, whom I formed and made. And so this is my reminder that I was created for his glory and that I need to create for his glory. Similar to what you said, I will create stuff and never put it out there. I will start stuff and not finish it because I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of it is some of the insecurities that maybe come with being a survivor, some of the worried about what other people think, etc., like whatever the case may be. But I'll work in Canva, create a whole thing and never release it. And so my goal this year with Create is to create it and put it out there. Like just put it out there for his glory. It's not about me. It's not about what other people think about me. It's about his glory. And if I can keep that as my focus, then hopefully I will continue to create and put stuff out there. Because if not, I'm just hiding it under a bushel. And I think what makes it especially hard is the content that we create and the things that we talk about are not the happy, feel good, happy go lucky things that you necessarily see on social media. So I don't always feel like it's popular or it's appreciated or wanted. Like I could spend hours working on something and put it out there and I don't even know if it gets seen because it has the word abuse in it. And so it gets hidden, or maybe people just don't look at it or it's not engaged with. I have no idea. But I cannot worry about that anymore. I have to just do what God's called me to do and create. And even if it's just one person out there who sees it, then it's worth it for that one person. And so this is all about pointing people to hope and to healing and to Jesus. And so that is why we do what we do.
Right, right. And we do other things, both you and I, besides this podcast. You have other jobs, and you're an author. My husband Dale and I, we co founded Speaking Truth in Love Ministries, which deals with abuse and domestic violence. And we go into churches and community groups and speak about how to prevent and how to respond to abuse and also how to heal from abuse. We minister to survivors and church leaders and lay people, just helping them to understand the impact of abuse and how to minister to survivors and how to hold offenders accountable, which is very hard because a lot of times the offender and the victim are within the same family or within the same church group, and people love them both. And it's very hard sometimes to hold somebody accountable that you loved and trusted, and it it's just a difficult subject to deal with.
Yes, it is. And I think that's why it's hard to get into churches. It's hard. It's not easy to get into churches for speaking. And that's why I appreciate every time a church opens their doors because it allows the truth to be spoken. And this, I think, is such an important message. I completed some training yesterday through Darkness to Light, and I've already completed their Stewards of Children training, which is about protecting children from sexual abuse. But this was a training specifically for protecting children from commercial exploitation, human trafficking, child pornography, those kind of things. And one of the things that I found out at the very beginning is that 90% of children who have been commercially exploited sexually were previously sexually abused. 90%.
Mhm.
So all of the children that have been trafficked, child pornography, all of those things, 90% of them have already experienced sexual abuse. And I know in my experience, it seems like people are willing to talk about trafficking and they're willing to make that important. And it is important. But I wish that we would have focus also equally on sexual abuse, because that is where the patterns start that can make someone extremely vulnerable to commercial exploitation, to trafficking, to child pornography, to grooming, to all the things. It starts with a pattern of being groomed and being abused. And those behaviors make you a certain way, like make you respond to things differently than you normally would had you not been sexually abused, had you not been groomed. And so I just thought it was a fascinating training. It was free. They're offering it through the month of January. So and you could do the online version or the in-person version. But the other thing that they said that I thought was interesting is they had two survivors share their story, and they said, I wasn't trafficked because I was a runaway. I wasn't trafficked because I was in foster care. I was trafficked because someone purchased me. And because there's a market for people wanting to buy and willing to buy children. And I think you can look, on the internet, in the news, local news, national news, children are being exploited because there are people that are willing and wanting to buy them. And that has to change. That has to stop. Mm-hmm. And they went so far as to say that men should stand up and say, this is wrong. We should not tolerate this. This is awful. Because there are things out there on the internet that normalize this behavior, that makes them feel justified in doing this trafficking and stuff because it's normalized. Other people are doing it. There's entire websites dedicated to children, etc. And all of that is wrong.
Now, what is the website again for those people that want to go do this training free online?
Darkness to light.org. And they actually have stewards of children training that can be used in churches, can be used in community, workplace. If you're in any workplace that works with children, I would recommend it. And the reason I think it's so beneficial to do training like that is because when you are hiring people, you are saying to them, we care about sexual abuse. We will not tolerate sexual abuse. We care about our children. And we are an organization, a group, a business that will not tolerate it. So they know coming in, there's no tolerance here. And then they have to sit through the training, which I would think would be uncomfortable for someone who is a perpetrator. And it was uncomfortable for someone who's a survivor, but in a healing way, in a good way. And they also, throughout say, if you need help or resources, here's a number to call. They have their own hotline that you can call. But I just think it sends the message that we care. And I think the reason that we have churches, especially with people in it who perpetrate abuse, is because it's not talked about enough. It's not addressed enough to the seriousness, to the point where it comes across that we are serious about the consequences of this happening. And we will respond if this happens.
Right. And I think my husband, Dale, has been a pastor since 1983. And we went to Bible college and they never talked about abuse. It was like it doesn't happen within the church environment, and it does. Sadly, it happens very frequently. We weren't taught what you should do when an abuse survivor comes and says, hey, I was abused by this person, and how do we respond? And even domestic violence, a lot of times the wife is told that she just needs to be more submissive, and which does not help the situation. It just makes the offender more abusive because then he feels like she's weaker and weaker. Um, but people want an easy, instant fix, and abuse is not an easy, quick fix. The impacts are long term.
Right.
Like you and I know that the impact of what we went through is going to last us a lifetime. We get healing, but there are some things that last a lifetime, and we can't just say to an offender, you just need to say you're sorry and cry some tears, and the victim needs to just forgive and forget, and we can go back to everything the same way. Because sexual abuse and domestic violence are criminal acts. And we can't just say, okay, you said you're sorry, and there not be any consequences for your criminal activity. And I think in churches, especially, like, we love the offender a lot of times and we want to protect them from the consequences. We don't want them to go to jail. We when I was a child, it wasn't my goal that my dad should go to jail. But I wanted the abuse to stop when I was a child, but I didn't even dare to tell anybody because if I told somebody, I knew what he was doing was wrong and needed to be punished, but I loved my father as well. And it's like, what's going to happen if my dad goes to jail? What's going to happen to our family?
Right.
You know, all of those things come into play in a church family, in just the family that lives in one home. It creates a lot of questions, and people want the least amount of hurt for everyone. And so they just think, well, if he says he's sorry and we think he's repentant and she forgives him, then we can go on like nothing happened. But that doesn't solve the problem. It
Mm-mm.
just, it, he may even move on to a different victim, but it's pretty certain that he's going to have more victims
Right.
if we don't have the consequences to stop him or her, I should say. There
Right. Because
are
it's both.
there are female offenders as well. I often say him because my offender was a him, and most offenders that I know of are male, but there are female offenders as well, and we need to realize that as well.
Right. And you mentioned them saying, I'm sorry. And I know you've talked to a lot of survivors. I've talked to a lot of survivors. I have never heard of a story where an offender came forward without any kind of confrontation, where an offender came forward and recognized that what they were doing wrong, acknowledged what they were doing wrong, and apologized for what they were doing, and offered to do whatever it took to make it right. In all of the stories that I've heard, it's they are confronted and they are sorry because they were confronted. It's not because they recognized the impact. And so I think that's important to point out because confronting is so important for that reason. Because otherwise, if you don't confront them, then if they didn't see it as a problem prior to confronting them, they're not going to see it unless you confront them. And then you have done your part in making them aware. And then it's up to them, like
Right,
the church,
right,
the people that are involved or whatever. But
right, right. And we need, I think, when a church addresses the issues of abuse, they need to be victim focused. What is the best thing for the victim? Not
right.
what's the best thing for the church, to
Mm-hmm.
make sure that the name of the church isn't tainted, that the offender isn't hurt or doesn't face legal consequences. We need to focus on the victim and not on the offender and not on the church, the organization. Because I mean, there are other organizations besides churches that are confronted with abuse within their community. There's community organizations, there's
Sports.
camps, yep, sports. All of these medical schools, all of these organizations need to do their part in learning about abuse and the impact, and also make sure that they have child protection policies that they follow,
Hmm.
and make sure that they're a safe place for people, for survivors as well as victims, to come forward and be heard. I
Right.
think that's important for victims and survivors to know that if they come to the leadership, they're going to be listened to, they're going to be heard, and there will be some type of an investigation to make sure that people that are abusive are not in leadership or caretaking positions. I mean, who's teaching the children who are working in the nursery, all of those things? We need to make sure that the people that we put in place are safe people.
Right. Right. Absolutely. So that's why you mentioned that you have already traveled this year and you were able to speak. It was at a
Yeah.
church or at an event?
It was it was in it was a church community. We were invited to a church community in Ohio. The event was held in a community center that they rented, and they had over 100 people that attended, and that was pretty evenly matched, men and women. Most of them were married couples. Some of them brought their children with them, but it was mostly adults. And it was a 1 day seminar that we did, and the presentations were um, understanding abuse, responding to abuse, and healing from abuse. And we also did another presentation called What Does God Say About Abuse, where he brought in scripture references where God directly talks about abuse and how we need to um, defend the fatherless and those that are hurting, and that we need to be a voice for those that don't have a voice,
Right.
and different things like that. So it was an all-day seminar, went from 8:30 to 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and we got a good response. And then when we got home, we got a call from another community that wants to do the same thing in their community in Pennsylvania.
Nice.
So we're going to be going to Pennsylvania in May to do the same seminar there. And I know also that you and I have both been invited to be speakers at a conference called Voices of Hope, and that's in Ohio, I believe New Berlin, Ohio. And we will be there the first weekend in April.
Yes.
And both you and I were our speakers there. And you and I, a lot of times people don't realize that we are in two different states. I'm in New York State, upstate New York. You are in North Carolina.
Hmm.
And we met in Tennessee. And God just brought us together and we started Conversations of Hope. And I'm also going to be attending a Called to Peace conference the beginning of May as well. And that's going to be in North Carolina. So we'll be down in your neck of the woods for a few days during that time. So we do keep busy, my husband and I,
Hmm.
and Dale and I want to start a podcast different from Conversations of Hope, but where we bring out a lot of scripture verses pertaining to um, abuse, along with we will probably have some guests on as well. And looking forward to this year, we've already started compiling lists of guests that we want to invite to join us on Conversations of Hope as well
Mhm.
this year. And what do you have going on so far this year?
Well, I had the vision board event. That was fun. And that was at our church. And I'm going to be speaking at their women's conference that's coming up. And it's going to be the 21st and 22nd of February. And then on the 23rd, the pastors asked me to speak that Sunday. And
Mm.
so I'm really excited about having that opportunity to share. I just booked my first flight out of North Carolina to go to Georgia and speak. And that's going to be in February also. And I don't know how I was trying to, book the cheapest flight possible. And so I'm going to get there really early and I'll be at the airport all day, but that's okay. I can work on writing and stuff, but this will be my first time like flying out to go to an event. So I'm going to be speaking in Georgia. And again, I'm looking forward to seeing you in April at the um, conference there. And I'm thinking I'm going to drive because it looked like airports were half an hour away. So I'm probably going to drive to that. But I'm really, really excited to be a part of that. And I am also going to be speaking to a health department next week. And whether it's church or a local organization or a community organization, talking about this is my passion. I don't think we can talk about it enough. I'm willing to talk about it as much as possible because I just think it's so important. And I think like having that conversation with people at the health department will help them when, as they think about their processes and also working with children, what that's like as a child. Um, because I know I wouldn't have answered that question. If you had asked me, was I being abused? I would have said no. But what I've learned through this training with Darkness to Light is there are other questions you can ask. Where do you feel the safest?
Mhm.
Who makes you feel safe? And pay attention to those answers because you're not asking them, are you being abused? Because they've been told, do not ever tell. That is deeply ingrained and they're not going to say, oh yeah, I am, generally. So, but there's other questions that you can ask. And then the other thing with that training that I think is so good is the Stewards of Children training actually encourages you to confront abuse if you suspect it, even if it's uncomfortable, because it is uncomfortable and it's messy. And I think that's why churches want to avoid it. And families want to avoid it because it's messy and it's uncomfortable. And what if you're wrong? And so you think, well, that doesn't look right, and I'm not really comfortable with that, but I could be wrong, and they're really good people, and I'm just going to go on and do the next thing I need to do and not think about that anymore. Where they're saying it's worth it to address it, even if it's just going in and saying, hey, it doesn't look good for you being in this room alone with this child, so I'm going to stand here with you just to make sure that everything is above board and it looks appropriate. I'm doing this to protect you, doing this to protect the child. So
Right.
it's being brave and taking stands like that when it comes to children, when it comes to seeing abuse. And so, yeah, I'm excited for the year. One of the things that uh, came out on my second vision board is some kind of retreat, like a
Mm.
place for healing and having a small retreat. And so I don't know what that's going to look like, but I am excited about having one and planning one. Um, but, and again, I know I mentioned in the past that like the RV, one day I want to have an RV and go
Mhm.
across the country. And so when I was working on my vision board, there was a pink RV and then the words go RV. And so I put that on there because who knows if that will happen, when that will happen, but I think it'll happen. It'll just be
Right.
a while, but I'm excited.
Right. And it would, which is interesting. Dale and I have had this vision of having a retreat center where survivors and advocates can come and just get away.
Mm-hmm.
And whether it's for a week, whether it's for a weekend, God has not provided that as of yet. But I feel like if God puts that vision in your mind, that He is going to bring it to pass at some point.
Right.
We just need to have our mind open to those opportunities when they arise so that we're looking for those. And it's just interesting that when you just said the retreat, it just came back to
Mm-hmm.
me that that's what we've been praying about it and thinking about it, and it's always in the back of our mind. And we moved into our ministry center this past year that was donated to our ministry, Speaking Truth in Love. A church that shut down donated their facility to our ministry, and it gives us office space. And we're going to be hosting our first training seminar here in our new ministry center also in April.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be limited to 50 people. And I think the registration fee is going to be $80. It's a 2-day seminar. And it'll go from 8:30, 9 o'clock to like 4 o'clock each day. And lunch will be provided each day, and we'll have different speakers. But we're also planning to have a speaker from California, and he wrote the book Sheltered but Not Protected. And
Mm-hmm.
he's a male survivor of childhood sexual abuse within the church. And his name is Justin Woodbury. And he's going to be coming clear from California out to New York State to speak at that conference. So we're looking forward to that as well. And we're just excited to see how much God is going to bless and how He's going to open doors for both you
Mm-hmm.
and myself and my husband, Dale, and other advocates. We're not a standalone Speaking Truth in Love. We want to help other advocates. We feel that God's called all of us to work
Mm-hmm.
in this field, which is not an easy field to work in.
Nope.
And we want to support other organizations that are advocates as well. And we do that by praying for them and by going and speaking at their events and being involved in their events. And, it's just so exciting to see God working. And I know it's not always easy because you and I both have had some trials. We feel we're in spiritual battle.
Mm-hmm.
And so we need to pray for each other,
Yes.
and what you and I do, we pray for each other. And we have things going on with our family. So I have a special needs granddaughter, and the family is trying to make provisions to get her home. She's been in the hospital for over a year, and we want to get her back home with her family. She has a trach and a feeding tube. And so our family's been working with that, and just life in general
Mm-hmm.
can have just difficulties that we have to face. So we do look forward to this year and the many opportunities that God's going to give us this year. And we also covet your prayers
Yes.
that God will protect us and keep us and just sustain us, because it's not easy. We have to make sure we're taking care of ourselves as well.
Right. Right. Yes. So thank you for your prayers and support. It means everything to us.
Thank you, and look forward to future podcasts. We hope this episode of Conversations of Hope has been a source of comfort and inspiration.
Remember, you are not alone on this journey of healing.
Visit conversationsofhopepodcast.org for more resources and information.
Please subscribe or follow and share with those who might need this message of hope. Until next time, keep hope alive.